Hello and welcome to the Plant Paradigm podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with incredible individuals from all around the world and look for ways to create a clean, green and sustainable home planet for every single being on here. Today is your monthly paradigm, the monthly debrief of all things that we find that is important that's happened in the past 30 days. And it's your place to keep up to date with things like climate science, nutrition, things related to veganism. And on these episodes, I am joined with my beautiful co-host and fiance, Sharna Harrington. Hello.
Hello. Let's do this.
Let's do this. So we have got a ripper episode today. We're going to be talking about, many things. And one of the deep dives we're going to go through today is surrounding mental health and veganism.
There was a new study that came out recently. What was it? 40,000 Brazilians?
Yeah, I think it was 14,000.
Oh, sorry.
14,000. There's still a 4 in there. Still a 4 in there.
14,000 Brazilians that did a survey. They found that veganism causes more depressive episodes.
Correct.
So we will break that down and go through that.
Yes, that's very exciting.
Yes.
Because, mental health, I think nowadays has become a very important topic, and it's become less taboo as years go by, which is fantastic. I think that's an incredible step. But I think when it comes to veganism, I find an extra interesting conversation to be had. So just on the personal front, we're back home in Australia, which is fantastic news. We'll miss the Asian sun. It is quite a bit more cool here.
And the cheaper food in Asia.
Oh, and the cheaper food.
We just went through our bank statement and it was like $12 lunch, $4 banh mi.
$75 tax, 75 cent taxi.
Literally.
And it's like, oh my goodness, like we are truly grateful to... It's weird how you can be in an economic position from one country to another and just live a completely different lifestyle.
So moral of this story, go and retire in Asia.
Yes.
Live like king and queens.
Absolutely. And I did, during my time there, I took my Four Sigmatic coffee. So I wasn't too far away ever from a coffee. As much as, I love the $1 coffees and the $2 lattes, but it's nice to have a little bit of fungi in my diet with that Four Sigmatic sachets. So for those who haven't tried Four Sigmatic before, you can hop onto their website and enter code PLANT10 for 10% off your purchase.
Yummy. And
Yes.
they've got a great hot chocolate too, which is great for before bed, nice and calming.
I have been having it before bed actually this past week, and I think it does help a little bit with sleep. I didn't expect it to, but it's just but it's also, where's your head at when you're having this hot chocolate? Your intention is set. Like I'm having this before bed and I'm getting ready. My brain's dialing down a little bit. And so, I've been having it like an hour and a half before sleep, and I've just found that the mood shifts a little bit. So
Nice and relaxing.
it is, I agree. But shall we get into our stories?
Hit us with your first story.
My first one. So a climate scientist has surprise revealed that the people at the Eco 27 were eating kitten soup. Have you seen the video of this?
I haven't.
Cool. So I'll insert it in the podcast in a moment, but it's dubbed as Kittengate. That is the story of this event. And Dr. J. Kumari swapped out chicken soup for kitten soup. Now, this is to show that the right conversations still aren't being had in that community around animal agriculture and its impact on climate change. So I'll insert that footage here.
Could this be the worst blow to the climate movement yet? Definitely one of the most bizarre. In shocking images we've obtained from the Eco 27 summit, attendees are eating what they believe to be cream of chicken soup, normally delicious, right? When renowned climate scientist Dr. J. Kumari leaps to the podium and announces that he has swapped the chicken with kitten. We're talking baby cats here. He then starts chanting a phrase from a banner that reads #Don'tThrowUp, which I'm sure plenty of people there did.
The most fascinating part of all this is actually, American news is quite entertaining to watch, to say the least. And this reporter, Bryce Harding, I had never seen anything of him prior, but I generally don't like spreading too much hate, so to speak. But I mean, we have a word for people like him, and he just seems like a tool. The way that these reporters, beyond the story, I think there's an underlining point. And Australia, and I think a lot of the world has this problem, is news is not opinions. If you're a reporter or a journalist and you're sharing an opinion and you're saying that is news, that is not okay in my books. You are sharing news. You are not sharing your opinion. And so in this breakdown, viewed by millions of people, he's and I'll insert footage again of this, but it's not professional to share your opinion about something that's so dire, especially when it comes to climate change. Like, you're not a 6-year-old kid playing on a playground. Like, you're here to spread the correct information.
Why not include beans or cats or dogs?
Wait, because wait, hold on. What? Dogs or cats?
Well, it seems clear that Kamari was trying to expose this irrational mentality of meat. He was trying to expose what's called carnism. It's the invisible belief system that conditions people to eat certain animals.
Oh, okay, great. All right, so another new woke social justice end-all oppression term that progressives are going to make us use.
This is a bona fide term used in the social sciences. And
okay, but like, really? I mean, like, really? Invisible belief system? What is it? Are we in the Matrix now? Or is Neo behind me?
Props to them for getting Dr. Melanie Joy on there to kind of explain this. And the underlying point in all this is, why are you comparing... His point is, but chicken is a more eco-friendly option than beef, which is true. But her point, which I think is really important as well, is like, why are you stopping at chicken? Why aren't you comparing beef to beans? Why do you stop at something that's still got an environmental impact?
And is a sentient being.
Yeah, 100%. So what do you have? Do you have a certain thought around eating kitten soup? Because I couldn't...
Well, you mentioned to me that people were vomiting after it. Look, I get that, because I'm sure a lot of people in that room would have had a kitten in their life, or currently have a kitten, or now have a cat. So it would be very confronting. It's a very bold move if that is actually true. Did we ever find out if it was...
I watched the video 3 times, and I don't know if I missed it, my brain was elsewhere, but I couldn't find whether it was actually kittens. There was no mention of it not being kittens. So my first questions of like, where did he source that? How did he get into the kitchen and swap that out? So I had not found any evidence that it wasn't kitten soup. So I'm assuming the worst case scenario, that it was indeed kitten soup. And, in the footage, you do see people like doing the belching, ready to go kind of.
Far-reaching, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really perplexed with the topic, whether, I understand the point. I really do, what Dr. J was trying to convey.
It's just a very far-fetched way of going about it, if that is actually what has happened.
Correct. So it all depends on whether it's true or not. The point still stands that, it comes down to species and how we...
and kittens are no more important than cow and vice versa.
Correct.
So, yep, I get it. It's just, very confronting.
I'm curious to know what people, think about this. If you guys have a particular opinion, whether you think this is right or wrong, I'd love to know on Instagram, because this is like... We talk about this kind of stuff every now and again, this concept of... I think Dr. Melanie Joy originally coined this concept of carnism, or because she wrote that book, Why We Eat Pigs But Not Dogs. I think that's what it was called. And it's a very fascinating topic. But what do you guys think? Should we be eating kitten soup?
I remember this billboard on the freeway one time, and it was, cows, sheep, pigs, and then it went to like dogs, cats, and rats. So it was just in a line, and they were like, where do you draw the line? And someone, like being a smart ass, went up and drew a line between pigs and dogs. And it's like, why is the line there? That's just a cultural thing. Because for Chinese people or Vietnamese people, which we found out on our trip, that the line would be non-existent.
Yeah.
They would eat all animals, but there are some, India that don't eat cows, and then it's, Muslim people that will not eat pig. There's just, everyone's got their own cultural line. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's a super fascinating topic, but I think more conversations like this need to happen. Maybe there doesn't have to be a kitten soup involved for that conversation to happen though.
Yay for those chickens that got saved.
Yeah. the silver lining.
Upside. Far-right US politician claims that global warming and carbon is good.
Who's the politician?
So this is for the US,
Okay.
not Australia. And maybe we can insert the YouTube clip. It's actually,
Okay.
I think she did it on TikTok, I think. No, yeah, I think
Fantastic.
it might have been on TikTok, but she was on like a TV host, a show host.
This earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us. We've already warmed 1 degree Celsius, and do you know what's happened since then? Here, let me tell you. We have had more food grown since then, which feeds people. We are able to, producing fossil fuels keeps people's houses warm in the winter. That saves people's lives. People die in the cold.
Right.
This earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us. It helps us to feed people. It helps keep people alive. It helps. The earth is more green than it was years and years ago, and that's because of the earth warming. That's because of carbon.
Her name's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She claims that the earth has already increased by 1 degree and that helps grow more crops to feed more people, and that fossil fuels are good to keep people warm, which keeps them alive.
Fascinating.
And I
train of
quote,
thought.
yes, I quote, plants need carbon. It's a life cycle, but climate activists want to kill carbon.
Fascinating. Well, I'm going to let you continue with this thought in a moment.
thank you.
But the first thing out of the bat, I'm like, it's so strange how we can't deny, besides that very last point, they want to remove carbon, that we know that that's actually scientifically impossible. We need carbon to actually exist on a planet. We are
Correct.
made of carbon.
Yes.
However, what she's saying is technically true because your first point was plants need carbon. They absolutely do. Mm-hmm. Plants grow in certain conditions, and if it warms, that is going to suit some plants better than others.
In some areas.
That's
right.
So there is like this glimmer of truth, and that's where I think this gets really frustrating because you can't just say, you straight up deny it because she's saying the truth, but the truth is, it's not black and white like that.
No, it's not. We actually watched the news the other morning and we saw a climate protest in Sydney.
Yes.
Yeah. So she used a bike lock to attach herself to the steering wheel and she was on a major freeway.
Yeah, she was
I
on there.
believe.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
correct.
she had just pulled over and done it. So she was copying abuse left, right and centre. Absolute outraged people screaming at her, right?
Yeah.
And then the next 2 news segments were about extreme weather. Hail, the
Yeah.
storm in Florida, which I actually don't even know how that ended up.
Yeah. I've seen memes, but I haven't seen like a lot of the real footage. But Florida, as a side note, is actually going to be one of the first cities in the continental base of the mainland US to actually go underwater, correct, because of their coastal line. A lot of parts of the state have actually been underwater, and we know they already have quite algal bloom issues. So their ecological system is getting far worse. But yes, continue.
Well, my point there is that people are outraged because they're inconvenienced by this protester, but they're not outraged at the floods. They're not putting that back onto themselves in any way, shape or form. And then there's this politician saying that climate change is good. It's so how do you even understand people's thought like that? So her other quote was, the earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us. I just want to also point out that she's a huge Trump supporter. Huge right winger.
I just assumed.
Yeah. And she had, when I did a Google search on her, the first thing I saw was that she's a conspiracy theorist. So it's just sad that there are people out there that will be listening to her and believing that.
Yeah.
And, their bias is now confirmed because this woman is a politician and she's supposed to be really intelligent. And yeah, it's just very sad to hear that.
Yeah, that's super frustrating. But, it's so funny that politicians are meant to be intelligent. Yeah. Yeah.
But she's also mentioned how fossil fuels keep people alive. Yes, this is true, but there are other forms of keeping people alive without using fossil fuels. So you can assume by that her pockets are deep with fossil fuels.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, it's so funny talking about this climate change is good kind of thing. Last week we released, or this week technically as recording, but the last episode released was with Dr. Andrew King, who is a meteorologist at University of Melbourne. So he works a lot with the river stratospheres, and he's an expert on the topic. He's written plenty of papers. He's featured in an ABC conversation, etc. Now, that episode has gotten the most amount of hate of any episode I've previously released.
Interesting.
By many, many folds. And it's also gotten, the shorts and the reels that I've posted on it have gotten thousands and thousands and thousands of views. Now, the comments coming are incredibly fascinating. They're very on the same point that climate change is natural, denying climate change, but trying to use very big words.
Scientific words,
but completely misconstruing what those words actually mean. Like, yes, no one who's talking about climate change is denying that the world goes in cycles.
No, ice ages have been happening for, many centuries.
And people are just saying, oh, this is natural and you can't prove anything. And it's funny how this happens. And they're all in the same boat. So if you look at them, they're all conspiracy theorists. They all believe, a certain thing that these conspiracy theorists believe. And I won't name.
So they've gone down a YouTube hole.
They've gone down the YouTube rabbit hole. And it's so fascinating how it's very consistent. What you find a climate denier or someone who thinks climate change is good, they have a certain set of values and beliefs that are so similar to everyone else in the community. And they tend to not question that, or they're very hard to communicate with. So,
because they found their community, they can communicate this with their other people, and they're like, that means their mind is set. Their mind is made up.
Yeah. And look, vegans fall into that same category sometimes as well, with exacerbating science and things like that. But this is a lot more dangerous than making people exclude animal products. This is talking about, and some of the climate denialism comes from, who cares, if very cynical kind of views. So I find it very fascinating how, I don't know where it's come from, because last year, if you had asked me, I'd say there's not a lot of climate deniers, but now I'm thinking there's a lot more than I previously thought by many folds over.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's sad. A lot of them are politicians. And, I've heard plenty of them say, even in Australia, that climate change isn't a huge threat, especially if they're paid by fossil fuel industries. They have to, fund their ventures, and that means taking money from an industry that maybe doesn't have our best interests.
Greed.
That's right. Speaking of climate change, renewable energy is a huge term, and scientists have created sustainable energy from thin air. And we're talking about this quite a bit because it's something I was super excited about. And the headline is not a joke. So it's hydrogen energy, which currently today is one of the safest and most sustainable energy forms on the planet. So the challenge is that geographically, the renewable distribution of freshwater availability poses a threat. Because at the end of the day, it does utilize water. So there is not enough. At the moment, the UK, with the technology we have, we know that we couldn't run on hydrogen there, because I think in my episode with Professor Pericles, he said there's actually not enough freshwater lake systems. So there has to be new solutions, and people shouldn't think of hydrogen energy as that's it. You need to combine hydrogen with solar, with wind, biomass, all that kind of stuff. So in this paper, authors demonstrated a method of direct hydrogen production from the air on site. Now, I'll post like a graph up in a second, but they capture fresh water from the atmosphere using a hydroscopic electrolyte and electrolysis powered by solar or wind with, and for the nerds, the current density is up to 574 MA/cm square meters. So I don't really know what that means too much. But the prototype was established and operated for 12 consecutive days with a stable performance. So this is tested on a certain scale. Now, it can work. So this is the first question you gave me is, it can only work in like tropical areas. But actually, it works down to an area with 4% moisture. So it can operate in most environments. Now, given that it's operated with solar, it's fully off the grid, self-sufficient. Now, for those nerdy enough like me, I'm going to read off the description of what the actual contraption is. So the module consists of a water harvesting unit in the middle and electrodes on both sides paired with gas collectors. The module is integrated with a power supply, for example, a solar panel, a wind turbine, and any other renewable generators. Importantly, the water harvesting unit also serves as a reservoir to hold the electrolytes. A porous medium such as melamine sponge, sintered glass foam is soaked with deliquescent ionic substances to absorb moisture from the air via the exposed surfaces. I won't read too much on, but I'll put it on the website. If you picture like two platforms and then a sponge in the middle.
Okay.
That's the easiest way when I'm looking at it, I can explain. And there's a lot of math that they've done. And a concern you raised the moment I told you is the same concern that Professor Pericles raised when I emailed him about the invention. And that is simply that if you take water from somewhere, it's coming from somewhere.
And if it's, if water is in the air, it's surely needed to be in the air. So are we just drawing from one resource to give to another when we.
Correct. That hasn't been proven, but there is, a decent hypothesis theory behind that. Because if you, for example, put this in Cairns, tropical North Queensland, there is a river stratosphere that actually takes clouds to the desert and gives places like Alice Springs, Cooper Pedy much needed rain through the mountain ranges. So if you install something that's in Cairns where it's tropical, it's going to have quite a lot of moisture bringing in urine.
And that's all thanks to the Daintree rainforest, really.
Correct, yes. You're in risk of, potentially removing a lot of potential rain from these areas that very, very much need it.
Just hurting that ecosystem.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's why I haven't put this in the good news segment, because it is a very, very cool, one-of-a-kind contraption with potential downsides.
Yeah. More research required.
2
servings of fish a week is linked to skin cancer.
2 servings. Wow.
In the study, there was a study conducted, I think it was in June earlier this year. Mm-hmm. In the study, they examined that the associations between intake of total fish and specific types of fish and the risk of melanoma among just under 500,000 people.
Really? That's quite a big... Huge population there.
So they were Americans aged 50 to 71. Mm-hmm. And they found that the higher total fish intake, tuna intake, and non-fried fish intake were positively associated with risks of both malignant melanoma and melanoma in situ, if I'm saying that right. Mm-hmm. Situ is when the cancer cells are limited to the very outer layer of the skin and have not invaded this second layer. And we learnt this morning that we've got 3 layers.
Yeah. The dermis, the epidermis, and the hypodermis.
That's right. So what was the outer layer?
I think that's the dermis.
So then situ is just on the dermis. Hasn't gone into the other 2 layers. Mm-hmm. A typical daily intake of fish, 42.8 grams, which is equivalent to about 300 grams per week, can increase the risk of malignant melanoma by 22%.
Wow.
Heavy metals like mercury are found in fish and have shown to cause several other problems in the body other than cancer.
I have a few thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I'm hearing this stuff, I'm just like, yeah, no joke, but I have my own certain biases. So I'm trying to find what else could be the reason. Is it that people who eat more fish also eat other animals that are more fatty in basis?
Well, I guess it's skin cancer. So you could also think, if fish is readily available, are these places quite hot? Are they, by the ocean? Are people
Where was
spending?
the population, do you know?
Didn't say.
Okay.
these people are likely spending more time at the beach, that kind of thing. I don't know. I'm just thinking, it's skin cancer. Why would skin cancer relate to eating fish? But apparently there is a correlation.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking the age group is actually quite good, because that's when, you could argue that aging is causing the disease because it's lowering your immune system, but that is the type of population we want, because that's the population that's most susceptible to these cancers and other diseases. So
I think it was like 1 in 38 white people would be getting skin cancer. It was like 1 in 1,000 for Africans or black people.
yeah.
And then Hispanic was like 300 to 1. So white people are definitely more susceptible.
Oh, of course, we know that, but we also know that from sunscreen and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, and very contradictory, because you think like the Mediterranean diet is linked with very positive outcomes.
But do they eat fish that often? Like,
You mentioned 300 grams a week,
Yeah.
right? I'm not sure how much exactly they would eat per week, but they do eat it weekly, if not more a week. So it might be a smaller serving, but when they're eating fish, to my understanding, it is the main protein staple on their plate then in that particular meal.
Unless they're not eating tuna. But saying that, it says total fish intake, tuna intake, and non-fried fish intake.
Fascinating.
But yeah, obviously more research is required for that as well.
Okay, yeah, that is...
But we'll pop a link of the study.
Yeah,
so you
I
can all
want to
check
read that as well. That's very cool. King Charles, the Eco Prince. So I don't want to talk too much about the Queen and whatnot, because I'm sure everyone's heard plenty about it. I just want to talk about the now King Charles. Now, while the media, again, have given them enough screen time, I just want to mention that currently Charles, back in his 20s, was actually a bit of a tree hugger. So I don't know if he's veggie or anything like that. Oh, actually, I do know a little bit about that.
Well, he's definitely not veggie.
He's not veggie. But back in his 20s, in like 1970s, he was very outspoken about how we should stop polluting the ocean, stop fracking, and the detriments of oil and gas, etc. And more recently, Charles actually revealed to the BBC that he doesn't eat meat and fish for 2 days a week and dairy for 1 day a week. Even his 50-year-old Aston Martin runs on surplus English white wine and cheese.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. There, it actually runs on
Wow.
leftovers, yeah. Very cool. So, of course, his footprint, again, is way higher than the average person, given the mansion and the private jets. Something that I would love to see is him to retain that eco-princeness and be a bit more political. But I think due to the structure of the monarchy, they have to take an oath of silence when it comes to political regimes.
But that's interesting that he only has to do that when he's king, but not when he's a prince. So he can be very outspoken as a prince, but not as a king.
I suppose
So interesting.
Anything can change. So if he chooses to, why can't he change the
Well, he is king now.
He's
He can
king.
change
He's
it.
like,
He
isn't
can
he
become
top
the
dog?
eco-king.
He can become the eco-king. Let's get into the deep dive. If you're vegan, you're more likely to be depressed.
Or have depressive episodes.
Have depressive episodes. So that's not really a clickbaity title. It's something we've seen quite a bit, especially if you're into scientific forums and whatnot. It's something that is discussed a little bit and has hit the headlines quite a bit across the world. Now, the reason we're doing this is actually a recent paper was published in the Journal of Affective Disorders that found that vegetarians have twice the chance of having depressive episodes than meat eaters. And that's a lot, twice the chance.
Double.
And the reason I wanted to talk about this is there's of course a lot of nuance anytime you talk about science, and this is such a black and white title, and I don't want people coming up to you and saying, I'd go vegan, but I don't want to be depressed, because you're depressed because you're not getting your protein levels, or you're depressed because you're not eating meat, you're depressed because you're not, whatever it is. I think this is really important. One, because to talk about mental health is really important, and to see what we found, how we can tackle this. But two, You want to be armed with this kind of information in case that conversation does come up. We want to make sure as many people are eating plants as possible and not having an increased risk of depression, especially if it can be avoided.
And if you are having issues or depressive thoughts, there are ways to help and people you can reach out to.
Of course. Your country will always have a hotline. So if this does trigger you in any way, shape or form, please do reach out to a friend, family member, or one of the professional hotlines where someone can walk you through it. But looking at the particular study, researchers surveyed 14,216 participants aged 35 to 74 years old over 6 months. So it's quite a large group. And I want to mention the exact conclusion from the study. Depressive episodes are more prevalent in individuals who do not eat meat, independently of socioeconomic and lifestyle factors. Nutrient deficiencies do not explain this association. The nature of this association remains unclear.
So more research is required yet again.
Correct. Now, is this data new and crazy? Like we said, no. This is not some revolutionary first of its kind study. There's plenty that has been done.
And we've discussed other studies on here just like this before.
Yeah, there was one done up in Brisbane.
Yeah.
Which was very misconstrued by the media.
Classic media.
But earlier this year, there was a meta-analysis published with 50,000 individuals that found the same thing. So, it's to be expected. Now, the first thing that ran through my mind is we look at health studies, right? You'll find not much of a difference in a lot of outcomes between meat eaters and vegetarians. But you'll find a big difference between vegetarians and vegans. So, of course, there's a difference in your diet. There's a difference in the way you associate yourself with your identity. So there's a lot of different pillars that come into play here. And before we get into the actual psychology, and I'll let you share your thoughts, I just wanted to run through the most comprehensive study I found on this. So something a little bit different. Early this year, Rishika Jain led a huge meta-analysis on the difference between vegetarian and vegan diets. So this is that exact question I wanted to know. Now, they had very strict criteria on what conclusion, how they structured the study. So strict criteria is very, very good, and I'll insert the actual table that they had, but it was things like over 18 years old. You had to have a comparison diet, and the outcome had to show some sort of depressive, or they had to be looking at depressive systems, not they were studying something else. Oh, and they also found this. So it had to specifically be looking at that. And there's lots of other different criteria that they had. But they reviewed each study using the rigorous NIH quality assessment tool. In total, they found 3,123 studies related to depressive symptoms and vegetarian vegan diets, and they only 25 study outcomes passed their tests. So, that's when the study is quality. Now, this is the actual results. 44% of the outcomes suggested that vegetarians or vegans are associated with high rates of depression. 28% suggested that it lowers the risk of depressive symptoms, and 28% found no correlation. So most likely you'll find no correlation to positive, but some cases you'll find negative. So only 4 of the studies actually looked at the outcomes of vegans. One was a randomized control study that found an improvement to depressive symptoms with those with a vegan diet. One cohort study found it to reduce depressive symptoms as well. So we've got 2 positives there. And then 2 cross-sectional studies, which is more like your survey type of situation, found a vegan diet associated with depression. And one compared vegetarianism to veganism, and veganism was more associated than vegetarianism. So, obviously there's a lot to look at here: socioeconomic backgrounds, age, culture, finances, family relationships. There's a lot of different angles you can take on this. But what have you taken away from thinking about this?
When you first mentioned it to me, my food for thought was, are vegetarians and vegans more exposed to animal cruelty and the effects of climate change? And that is what might be contributing to their depressive episodes. Like, I'm not saying that we get depressed about climate change, but I'm saying that
Climate anxiety. We have a term.
It is a thing.
Yeah.
It is a thing. It really can affect you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if that might have something to do with some of the episodes that they're mentioning. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't.
I wonder if, like, you know, because when you first, I talk about this a lot, when I first decided to take on a vegan lifestyle, I was quite a lot more militant and aggressive. And there's lots of different communities or ideologies that have, I think, the same structure. So not that I want to relay veganism to anti-vaxxers, but in that group, you find that there are a subsector that are quite aggressive. Now, would these people be more susceptible to depressive symptoms because of how long they've been an anti-vaxxer, or because they're X? You know, is it because of that? Or if someone, again, within veganism, we're talking about this off mic, if someone is just plant-based for their health, and then you've got a second group that is vegan for the animals and or the environment, what is the difference there?
Well, yeah, as we were saying before, I think there's a lot more trigger points as well. Like you mentioned, if they're driving past a KFC, are they going to get really upset thinking about those chickens that are being slaughtered? Mm-hmm. Are they going to drive past Macca's and think, oh, look at all those cows that are being put in those burgers? They're triggered by these points. And we know KFC and Macca's are absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't drive 5 minutes without seeing some sort of restaurant. Are they completely triggered every single time they're seeing that, and that's what's getting them really upset?
That's a great point. And actually, on a sidebar of that, I was listening to something, and I could have actually put this in my good news, but it was one of those Scandinavian countries like Finland or Denmark. They're banning meat advertisements.
You know what? I vaguely heard something about this.
Yeah, I think it was Outrage and Optimism that I was listening to, and they said, you know, it's just like tobacco. So they surveyed the population. They said, would you like to see propaganda on your TVs? That was the question that was posed to them, and the population said no. So they've banned meat advertisements.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I read something like, you know, one day meat will have those smoking kills, meat causes this, like. How interesting. That should be a thing. And I think it will eventually. We never, ever thought that would happen on the smoking packets. Ever.
Oh, for sure. It's, you know, people don't remember that time.
Yeah, I remember still the red and white or the blue and gold. Like, I remember those. And now they're plain with a huge, disgusting photo on it. Like, it's insane to think the progression there. And I feel like hopefully meat won't be too far behind that.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see where that goes, but it's...
Do you think it would happen with lollies? Like,
yeah,
lollies
well, that's the other point.
make you lose your teeth.
Why stop at meat? Like, we're saying that as a bias, but, you know, at the end of the day, if someone eats a little bit of chicken once a week, that's not going to destroy their lives. You know, the chicken might have a different story about that.
Yes.
And that's, you know, where you have to think beyond that. But... like, again, why not go to... But you'll never... I don't know if... I don't want to say never, because...
Finish your sentence.
People thought that about smoking, but,
yes.
You know, how could you... You'll have to have a diet that... Or like the...
But saying that one guidelines. Cigarette won't hurt you. Like...
True. Nobody stops at one Pringle, one of those ones. When you pop, you can't stop. Was that their
now
logo
I want
or something?
Pringles, thank you. But I think another point of the study is... how were their diets? Are these vegans
Great point.
eating saturated fat and sugar constantly? Like, or are they eating whole foods, plant-based foods?
Yeah. Well, I think your point is very important, because I even found a study published on Springer that found, in quotes, a high consumption of refined sugars and saturated fat and a low dietary content of fruits and vegetables has been associated with the development of depression. And then further on in the study, they actually mentioned that this is why populations that follow a Mediterranean type diet have a small to medium benefit when it comes to mental health, and why being whole foods plant-based could also share that benefit.
And another point to that is, if these people don't really care too much about their health, they're eating all this fat, they're eating all this sugar, are they exercising? because we know how good exercise is for mental health.
No one can really deny that.
No. So it's, I think there's just so much to uncover with this study.
Well, it comes down to the limitations as well. We're talking out there with my sister who studies psychology, and it's fascinating how there's a lot of things that if you go do a questionnaire, how did you sleep the night before?
That's exactly right.
How's your relationship? Did you have a fight with your spouse the day before? How was your diet? Have you exercised that morning? Maybe you missed your exercise and now you feel guilty. And so now and where are you at with your head? What's happening in the world at that time? Which is, Dr. Andrew Little had this point, and I'm going to use his quote a little bit. Now, a cohort study like this, a cross-sectional, is a snapshot in time. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to do a study like this in the middle of COVID about vegan diets, everyone in that era had a lot of people had depressive symptoms. No one's out here dancing of joy because of the strain that COVID's put on society. So what is happening in that moment? When was this done? If a study's published in June, it could have been conducted 2 years ago. It could have been conducted 5 years ago. There's trials that it has to pass and different regulations that it has to follow. It has to be, some will have to follow peer review criteria. And so that's why, cohort studies and cross-sectional studies in particular are really cool to ask questions and to maybe find something that's worth investigating. But if someone comes up to me and they said, you know what, Tom, I want to hear what you'd say first. I know, what, Sharna, I saw this on the news and I saw that vegan diets are associated with depression and, I don't want to put that on myself. How would you respond?
I don't know if I would go the advice way of just eating what feels best for you, reaching out, making that community, exercising, or saying like, let's look at this and uncover the study itself. I guess there's a few ways you could go.
True. You mentioned a point, which is just catering to that individual as well. Those questions are always really difficult because it's that whole thing, for 1% of the people, militancy will work. You shoving a screen down their throat showing X will make them do whatever you want him to do. Now, the way that I would, if someone come up to me, is just acknowledge, hey, I'm just going to do a bit of a role play here. Oh, I'm so glad that you're into your mental health and you're prepared to really take advantage of, the information that's coming to you so you can make the most educated and, I guess, best choices for your health in the long term. And that's really awesome for your friends and family because they want what's best for you. When we're looking at certain things like diets, they absolutely do impact your health. So I think you're very smart for bringing that up. If you're eating a bunch of lollies, we know how you feel after that. It's not always...
you feel great for the first 5 minutes.
Feel great, that's right. And so I think, to your point, we can't deny that diet affects our mental health, the way we feel, the way that we look at each other. There's no doubting that. Now, if you think a vegan diet affects your mental health, I would say you're also right, because lollies can be vegan and so can fruits and bananas. So I think when we're really looking at a certain type of diet, I would also encourage you to choose the healthiest choices regardless of your diet. So I would say that if you're wanting to follow a vegan lifestyle, you're going to be a lot more conscious of your choices, which means that, for me personally, I'd be thinking about making sure there's no guilt with the food that I choose. And I think if you follow a vegan diet, you become really passionate about food and you start loving health. So there is a really big opportunity for you to upgrade your health once following a plant-based diet, because you're going to find that you're going to be a lot more passionate about what you put in your mouth, a lot more thorough and a lot more thorough with especially the ingredients you're looking at. You want to be making the best choices. And I think you can do it in a great way and an unhealthy way. So, I implore you for really thinking about this and making this the right decision. And, if you choose to go down that vegan route, I'm always here for you as your support group, helping you whatever way you need help, so we can make sure that both our mental health is looked after.
And that's another thing your sister brought up was vegans cop it a lot from non-vegans. They often will be one vegan out of their whole community. Sometimes you'll be able to go and find your own vegan community. Sometimes that's only online or, so it can be hard to not be a part of a community. Or on Facebook, I see often people going, oh, I got invited to a barbecue, but I really don't want to go because they'll be cooking meat. And then you're isolating yourself from your people, which might not be as healthy, but if you go, then you're triggered by all the meat and the animals being cooked. So it's a vicious cycle. I actually spoke to a vegetarian recently. Well, I don't even want to label her a vegetarian. I just said, how are you going with your vegetarianism? And she said, I would slip up, or I would have a craving and I would slip up, and then that would affect my mental health.
So it's exactly what I was saying before. You feel guilty about the choices that you're making.
Yes. So I just said to her, do what feels right. If you're craving a little bit of chocolate, that's okay. Just go with it. And then eventually you might find other options. Like we've just tried the Lindt vegan chocolate. Amazing. It's just about experimenting and finding what works for you. But if putting a label on your diet is hurting your mental health, don't do it. Just don't do it. Just say you're eating food. Like, really, no one needs to know.
It is a good point. And I just want to mention, I was actually recently a part of a study, actually. It was someone up in New South Wales doing a study on masculinity, men, and mental health. And I don't know too much about the structure of the study, but it kind of seemed like a cross-sectional study of a smaller type cohort. But the questions, I was asked is very fascinating, especially for men, because I think men have very unique challenges compared to women, given, what is masculinity? And these are the types of questions that I was asked. What does masculinity mean? What does it mean for your masculinity when you went vegan? What are the types of conversations that you had with your friends and family? What challenges did you come across? And these all affect your mental health, because it's, you're going to get pressed, and you have to, and my response to a lot of these questions is you just have to be prepared, and you have to come across everything as the bigger person.
Life isn't easy, and no path you take is easy. That every single path is going to have its own challenges. So you're in a vegetarian path, you're going to find different challenges than someone that eats meat. But you all have your own challenges. So you've just got to pick the path that you're willing to face those challenges with.
Yeah, 100%. So to round this out with the mental health concept, when you're looking at studies like this, just know that there are limitations and you are unique. You're not a number. So when you're saying, vegans, it's like the thing with the watches. So there was a study that came out, people who had a watch and they see that they have a bad sleep, all of a sudden they've had a bad sleep without even connecting with themselves. How do I feel? Same thing. There was actually a very cool study. Person, and it's on YouTube actually, they have a fake hand. They think it's their hand, but it's not. So I don't know how it's structured. I heard it audibly, but I think they've put like a sleeve on top. They think it's their hand. And people are putting a hot rod on this person's hand. And now the rod is room temperature, but the participant is asked whether to say the rod is hot or cold. And the rod was set to randomly have a red buzz or a blue buzz, a little LED indicator. Now, when it went red, the subject almost always said it was hot. When it went blue, the subject almost always said it was cold, without it actually being their hand. And a separate study has actually been done where it was their hand. Still room temperature, still the same results.
Wow.
And so, the mind is a powerful thing, and don't let yourself, I think what's important for me is knowing that, yes, these 14,000 people, I'm sad that some of them had high rates of depression, but don't think that because you're vegan, you are going to be susceptible to this. Because if you think that,
you're right.
You're right. That's right. And if you don't think that, you're right. So I'd be very careful with the way that we interpret this information. And then that's when I'd focus on the different pillars of health. Veganism is simply an ideology. It's a philosophy. What about your goes beyond your diet, your lifestyle, your sleep, your relationships? Like we're talking about, it's multifaceted. So that's how I would kind of round out these points. I'm not sure if you have anything else to add there.
Well, it's really hard with these studies because, what are you supposed to do? Put 14,000 people in a box and feed them the same thing, have them reading the same thing, seeing the same thing, surrounded by their loved ones. Like, there's no way, I think, of getting a proper correlation between your diet and your mental health. It's great that these things are being researched,
100%.
but I think it just comes down to there's more research required, and more time will tell.
We understand so little about the brain. So mental health is such a complicated topic when it comes to studies. You, like you said, you can't put yourself in a box like that, especially when it comes to ones like these.
Yeah.
On to our sustainability tip.
Take it away.
Let's do it. So this one's really simple. I want to bring it back to basics because we've been noticing a certain level of conversation has been had for this very simple tip. Take your keep cup wherever you go.
And the reason for this is on Instagram, I'm seeing so many people going on their walk from their front door to their cafe and then enjoying their day, but they're not taking it with them. They're taking a photo with the cup and, in a beautiful park or on the ocean or something. So they're enjoying nature. Excellent. But they are not taking their keep cup, even though they are coming from their house.
This does not have to be complicated, people. I have walked outside of my house, not with a keep cup. So you don't need to spend $40 on a cool, flashy looking. I've walked out with mugs, with glasses.
Well, when we were living in Kensington, people did it all the time to that bakery down the road.
Yeah, all the time. People would just bring their nice, cozy mug. Hey, can you make it in this? It's. You don't need to be nervous. I don't know if there is a sense of nervousness there. I don't want to look silly. I don't want to look stupid. Like, thank goodness it is cool to be sustainable. It is cool to be environmentally friendly. So it's just, if you've gone to your local, just take a cup. The amount of times. Yeah,
we were doing it when we were traveling overseas. So we made the space in our suitcase for our keep cup, our water bottle, and our tumbler for smoothies, because we knew we would have multiple. And the amount of plastic that would be used in that would have been huge.
Yeah,
so
we would have saved so much. And you know what? If you can spare 10 minutes sitting in a cafe.
True, if you haven't got it. And that's what we generally do. If we haven't got our keep cup or if we haven't got our tumbler and we can't sit in, we don't get anything.
Yeah.
Like, I know that's very reductionist. That could be
so extreme,
It
Sharna.
could be so extreme to some people, but I think that's, we enjoy beautiful environments over our coffee.
You do anyway. Of course. And you know what?
Well, imagine if that photo on Instagram actually had heaps of rubbish in the bottom of it.
Yeah, like
they're taking that photo. They wouldn't be taking it if there was so much rubbish. And that's exactly what we saw in Asia.
Yeah, and there's no limit. In Asia, I would walk down because I can't be bothered sometimes washing my keep cup. So I literally just take, if you don't have the 5 minutes, I've taken just a mug. Because mugs are a lot easier than keep cups. So I just take a mug downstairs. I'm walking. I go to a place. They don't even give you weird looks. And this is Asia, where everyone loves plastic cups.
Loves it.
So I just think it's so simple. And it's a good reminder to have these conversations. And if you see someone taking a, photo with a disposable cup, message them like, where's your keep cup, man? That's what I say, and I say it in a funny way. I don't care if I add a wink or a P, that ... P face, whatever it is, the tongue out smiley face,
P face, okay,
the semicolon and the P.
I understand now.
Yeah, the P face.
P face.
God, that could be taken out of context. But if they don't have, guess what? You've just found a good birthday present to get them.
Yeah, I love that idea too. Like, we had a housewarming, and instead of buying them, I don't know, a vase or artwork or a plant. Which plants are great,
gift, actually. Yeah.
So don't diss the plant.
Don't diss the plants.
I got them those reusable silicone.
Yeah.
Like Glad wrap instead.
You put it on the container to store it for longer.
Yep.
What a beautiful gift. It saves them money. It's friendly for the environment. And it's something they probably don't have.
Definitely not.
But yeah, I think that's a very good sustainable tip to add. Onto the good news stories now. Albanese government's climate change bill has passed the Senate, and Australia now has an emissions reduction target of 43% by 2030. Decent news. Decent news. Now, 43% is not 100%. And
Thanks for pointing that out.
so here's just a few key points to know. The 43% reductions by 2030 target is the minimum and can be increased over time. So previously, the 43% was almost a cap or it's a target.
Yeah.
But now it has become the minimum,
Great.
which I think is a very key thing. The target automatically increases every 5 years to stay in line with Article 2 of the Paris Agreement, which aims to limit global temperatures to 2 degrees and strive for 1.5 above pre-industrial levels. And lastly, the Independent Climate Change Authority will provide the government with science-based policy advice annually.
That sounds great.
Sounds great.
Dolphin poo can be the key to saving the world's coral reefs.
No doubt.
Spinner dolphins, which are commonly found in captivity, as they're famous for their acrobatic marina displays without any training at all. So they're the ones that you would, if you see them and they do these little fancy tricks in the ocean, that's them, which is why they are so popular for captivity, unfortunately.
This is the ones that they, I think, catch as babies in that Japanese ocean.
Oh, right.
So I think in Seaspiracy, they were spinner dolphins, I believe.
There you go. So boycott SeaWorld, people.
Yeah.
They have very special poop. These dolphins, okay. So their poo has reef-enhancing nutrients, and study reveals that they likely enhance the coral reef's productivity and resilience. And they suggest that these dolphins play a role in making nutrients available to coral reefs.
So you're saying dolphins are part of this symbiotic ecosystem?
Could you imagine?
Wow.
So if we take dolphins out of the ocean, their poo can't help our coral reefs be resilient. So there's a huge little, what is that? Ecosystem.
Yeah.
So scientists claim simply by going to the toilet in the shallow atoll lagoons, these dolphins are providing a vital nutrient supply for the corals, making the strongest possible case for protecting the dolphins in order to save these reefs.
Very cool.
So not only are we being able to save the coral reefs, we're also trying to save the dolphins from becoming extinct. So keeping that alive.
Dolphin poop. That is awesome. I'm so glad that is a thing. And
who are these scientists testing dolphin poo? Why?
What a really cool, what do you do for work? Oh, poo? Yeah, I work with that thing. And it specifically comes from dolphins that do acrobatic tricks in the ocean.
I think most of these studies were from the Maldives as well. So
oh yeah, that makes sense.
Very cool.
Yeah, well, you know what? Everything affects everything. And we know there's so many studies and examples where something's been removed from the ocean and things have just gone completely amok.
Yeah, the ocean's one of those things that we just don't know enough about.
No.
We've done it with the planet or the land, adding snakes, which gets rid of the mice, but then we've got too many snakes, then we get cats, too many cats. Yeah, it's just...
There was actually this really cool study, and I don't know the exact details of it, but this scientist endeavored upon something so arduous, I couldn't imagine doing it myself. But there was this reef that had 1,200 species of, I don't know if it's total marine animals or just starfish. And they took out one starfish species at a time to see what effect it would have on the ecosystem.
Wow.
And they found every single one of them to be vitally important.
Incredible.
Different species of starfish maybe just has a different pigment somewhere.
Yeah.
But each one had their very, very specific and particular role in that ecosystem.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's you can't deny that nature has developed over billions of years to create the most perfect balance.
And I feel like if we just left it alone, it would fix itself.
100%.
We just don't do that.
We just don't do that. So Patagonia has been donated to a non-profit to fight climate change.
Can you explain what Patagonia is? Because that is a place. How do you mean?
Patagonia, the clothing company. So I'd imagine their clothes is what I'd put as adventure outdoor gear. So your Kathmandu, MacPack,
North Face,
these kinds of things. Patagonia is very cool, and they've been a part of the climate change community for a while. And I I've been wanting Patagonia stuff for a while, and they have these really cool surfing initiatives, and their tops are quite activism related. So like they'll have a top with like just a surf, a wave with their logo, which says Save the Ocean or stuff like this. And so the founder, Yvonne Chouinard, donated the company, which is worth $3 billion US, by the way, to the planet and the mission of preserving nature. Now, this is the most epic thing, and my favorite thing about reading about this news. Yvonne came out and said, as of now, Earth is our only shareholder. I'm like, oh my God, that is such a beautiful and eloquent way to put this. So him and his family have donated 2% of all stock and decision-making authority to a trust, which will oversee the company's mission and values. And the other 98% will go towards a non-profit called the Holdfast Collective, which I think is Patagonia helped found as well, which will use every dollar received to fight the environmental crisis, protect nature and biodiversity, and support thriving communities as quickly as possible. That's fantastic news. That is eco-capitalism if I've ever seen it. Yeah. Well, I think the founder, Yvonne, I think he was quite a big surfer and activist when he was younger. So he built this on that dream to want to do better for the environment. So as he's getting older now, I don't know what his age actually was, but in the photos, he looks like he's like mid-80s or so, donating the company to a charity. Like that is the ultimate mic drop moment for an activist. And I think not taking this lightly, this could go down as history for a $3 billion company to fight climate change. That's a lot of money and profit that they're making that's going to go towards conserving the ocean.
And the more products that get bought, the more money there is to support the climate.
Correct. So I'm really stoked with that. But that's it for us today. That is the monthly paradigm wrapped up in a nice, neat package of 1 hour. So the upcoming episodes, we have Erica Kritzatellis. So that's going to be all about traveling the world as a vegan. We're going to have Kathy Stevens, who is the founder of Catskill Animal Sanctuary. And then we have Ariel King on fighting racism and climate injustice. So 3 very different topics, traveling the world as a vegan, compassion, which is what Kathy's episode will be about, and animal sanctuaries, and then fighting racism and climate injustice. So hugely important topics that I'm very excited to release. Great conversations as well. And if you wanted to keep up to date with the monthly paradigm, in conjunction with this episode releasing, there is a newsletter that goes out. It's called the Monthly Debrief. And you can head to theplantparadigm.com and chuck in your email address there to get that sent in your email with a nice little neat package.
Lovely.
Well, that is all from us today. Stay happy, eat plants. Peace.